At nearly 20,000 feet in the Bolivian Andes, two hikers are crossing a glacier when they find strange pieces of metal scattered across the ice. A twisted orange panel, a canister from a life vest, part of an airplane seat, and the farther they climb, the more pieces appear. They're walking through the wreckage of a passenger plane that crashed into this mountain 31 years earlier. For decades, much of it had been locked beneath the ice. Now, as the glacier retreats, pieces of the aircraft are slowly emerging again. But here's the strange part. This plane was never missing. Investigators had known where it was all along. They simply couldn't reach it. If a passenger plane can remain out of reach for 31 years when we know exactly where it is, what happens when we don't? Since 1948, 83 aircraft capable of carrying more than a dozen passengers have disappeared and never been found at all. No wreckage, no black box, not one confirmed piece. So how does an aircraft weighing 60 tons simply disappear and stay missing? This is Blind Spot, where we find what's hiding in plain sight. We live inside the assumption that nothing in the sky goes unwatched. Open an app on your phone and you can see thousands of planes crawling across a live map in real time. Tail numbers, altitudes, speeds, all of it. Over 100,000 commercial flights take off every single day, and it feels like all of them are being watched every second by someone. But who actually does the watching? On land and near coastlines, it's radar. Ground stations bounce radio waves off the aircraft and read the echo back. Combine that with the plane's own transponder, a small box that broadcasts its identity, altitude, and speed, and controllers get a clean, constant picture. But radar has one hard limit nobody thinks about until it matters. It needs a straight, unbroken line of sight to the plane, and the Earth is curved. Once an aircraft moves a couple hundred miles offshore or drops behind a mountain range, that line of sight is gone. The radar isn't broken. It simply can't see around the horizon. Think of radar like a flashlight beam. It can only show you what's directly in front of it, in a straight line. Point it toward the horizon, and anything past that curve of the Earth simply isn't lit up. It doesn't matter how powerful the beam is. For decades, this wasn't a small gap. Over most of the North Atlantic and the Pacific, there was no radar coverage at all. Enormous stretches of sky where a plane was, functionally, on its own. Pilots checked in by radio at set waypoints, reporting their own position by voice, the same basic method used since the 1950s. As long as those check-ins kept coming, everyone assumed the plane was exactly where it said it was. But what if the next check-in never came? The problem wasn't just that nobody knew where the plane was now. It was that roughly knowing where it is means very little over open water, because that phrase does almost none of the work people assume it does. That problem became painfully real on March 8, 2014, when Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 lost contact with civilian radar less than 40 minutes after takeoff. Its transponder went silent, but the aircraft kept flying for nearly 7 more hours, proven only by faint, automatic handshake pings it exchanged with a single satellite. A signal never designed to track location, just to confirm the plane was still switched on. Engineers had to reverse engineer a flight path out of those pings alone. The first search zone covered the South China Sea. Then it moved, hundreds of miles at a time, as each new wave of satellite analysis shifted the estimate. Search teams have since covered over 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, one of the largest search areas ever surveyed, and found nothing there. Years later, confirmed fragments of the plane started washing up thousands of miles away on beaches in Madagascar, Mozambique, South Africa. scattered by years of ocean currents. Even though pieces of MH370 have been found over the years, the aircraft itself is still missing, along with all 239 people who were on board. MH370 isn't some historical outlier from a time before modern tracking. It happened in 2014 with satellite links, transponders, and modern tracking already in place. And once the transponder went dark, investigators were left with nothing but faint satellite pings to reconstruct a flight path from. The 83 missing aircraft are separated by decades, countries, and circumstances, but they all ended up with the same fundamental problem. At some point, nobody knew exactly where to look. Once a plane's last confirmed position is lost, it stops being a machine crossing hundreds of miles an hour and becomes something else, a search area. And a search area spread across open ocean, or land nobody can easily reach, is exactly the kind of place an aircraft can disappear into for good. This happened on June 1st, 2009. Air France Flight 447 disappeared over the mid-Atlantic during a storm. This time, investigators had a real advantage, a fairly tight estimate of the crash zone and floating debris on the surface to confirm it. And it still took nearly 2 years to find the wreckage. Why? Because the ocean floor beneath that debris sat nearly 4 kilometers down, in near total darkness under crushing pressure. 3 separate expeditions using submersibles and sonar came back empty. It wasn't until a 4th mission mapped the seabed meter by meter that they finally found it, a debris field scattered across the abyssal plain, further from the surface than most submarines can even dive. Air France 447 was out of reach almost 4 kilometers below the surface. The plane from the beginning of this video was nearly 6 kilometers above it, and out of reach for entirely different reasons. The flight was Eastern Airlines Flight 980, and it went down on New Year's Day, 1985, on Mount Illimani, killing all 29 people on board, the highest altitude wreck of a commercial airliner ever recorded. Investigators knew almost immediately where it was. What they couldn't do was get to it. The air was too thin for rescue helicopters, the ice too unstable, and the terrain too extreme for a full recovery. For over 3 decades, the flight recorder sat frozen into that mountainside, officially unrecoverable. Then in 2016, a former soldier and a biotech researcher came across the story online. For 31 years, the wreckage had been considered too difficult to reach. They decided to try to reach it for themselves. After months of training just to survive the altitude, they climbed to the debris field and within days found the flight recorders lying in the open, freshly surfaced from the retreating ice. But one question remains. Could it happen again today? In some ways, less easily. After MH370, regulators finally mandated that airliners report their position at least every 15 minutes over water, dropping to roughly every minute if the aircraft is in distress. Satellite networks now cover oceans that radar never could. That particular blind spot has genuinely shrunk. If you like finding the stories hiding in plain sight, subscribe to our channel, because there's always another blind spot.